Russia is tightening its noose on the key port city of Mariupol. It says more than 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers have surrendered. If Mariupol is seized, it will be the first major city to fall to Russian forces since they invaded in February. The Russian assault is also intensifying in the east, forcing all humanitarian corridors to a halt. Live to Ukraine and Latvia in just a moment, but first, a look at what's happening on the ground.
Mariupol is at the brink of falling into Russian hands. Moscow says more than 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers have surrendered.
В городе Мариуполь, в районе металлургического комбината имени Ильича, в результате успешных наступательных действий российских вооруженных сил и подразделений милиции Донецкой Народной Республики добровольно сложили оружие и сдались в плен 1026 украинских военнослужащих 36-й бригады морской пехоты. Среди сдавшихся военнослужащих украинских вооруженных сил 162 офицера, а также 47 военнослужащих женского пола. 151 раненому украинскому военнослужащему 36-й бригады морской пехоты на месте была оказана первичная медицинская помощь, после чего все они были доставлены в городскую больницу Мариуполя для лечения.
The southern port city is a key target of Russia's invasion. If Moscow seizes full control of the port, it will bridge Russian-held areas to the west and east, providing a land corridor for Russian troops and supplies. Thousands of troops have already been deployed in the area for new assault. At the same time, Russia is also bolstering its military in eastern Ukraine. Troops have been seen building up in the region as Moscow moves its focus on the Donbas region. Russian forces have continued to pound cities and towns around the area, including Kharkiv. At least 7 people have been killed, including a 2-year-old, over the past 24 hours.
Как можно в мирные дома вообще, в мирные дома жители? Мы вас не трогали вообще. Изверги. Твари, их по-другому не назовешь.
Как гэпнул, это глубоко голову успел вернуть. Немножко за это вернуло все свое тело, так все повыбивало. Все. Надо все по новой делать, лепить.
The escalating situation has now forced Ukrainian authorities to halt all humanitarian corridors. Ukrainian officials have accused Russian forces of violating agreements to allow people to flee, including blocking buses used in evacuation. While Russia repositions its target to the east, many of the towns in the north that the forces have left are strewn with the bodies of civilians killed. At least 720 bodies have been reportedly found around the capital. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says more graves are found every day. Russia has continuously denied targeting civilians. Meantime, U.S. President Joe Biden has hit out at Russian President Vladimir Putin, accusing him of genocide.
Philip Crowther joins us live now from Lviv. Philip, do we have any clarification on these conflicting reports that we're hearing on Mariupol? On the one hand, Russia claiming that Ukrainian soldiers have surrendered, and Kyiv, on the other hand, insisting that the city is still standing.
I'm afraid those will remain conflicting reports for now. As you mentioned, it's the Russian military that says that over 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers did surrender, but there has been no comment and certainly no verification of that from the Ukrainian side. Mariupol is a city that has been essentially battling for Ukrainian control because there are still Ukrainian forces there for a long time now. Russians have control over large parts of the city and indeed the entire surrounding area as well. We've also heard from the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister, by the way, that there will be no humanitarian corridors established today, and that includes out of the besieged city of Mariupol. The reasons given by the Ukrainian authorities are these, that the Russian armed forces blocked evacuation buses and violated ceasefire agreements. There have to be ceasefire agreements between Ukraine and Russia for these evacuation corridors to even function. And clearly there was not enough confidence from the Ukrainian side to organize any of them today. There have also been these evacuation trains getting people out of eastern Ukraine, further north from the city of Mariupol, but there are only two that will be functioning today. That's down in number as well, and there have been calls again from local authorities for people to get out of those cities in the central Donbass region, in all parts of that Donbass region, eastern Ukraine, as quickly as possible. Otherwise, on the ground, what we're also seeing is satellite imagery that is showing us that Russian forces, troops, but also Russian equipment is being moved into the central Donbass region, out of Russia into Ukraine, first of all, but also from those already occupied areas of the Donbass region, further into that area, all of those areas that Russia, of course, wants to get under its control quickly. We don't know yet when exactly this planned Russian offensive is truly going to begin, but everything clearly is being put in place right now.
Well, Philip, President Zelensky asks for weaponry at every opportunity as often as he can, and the United States is widely reported to be preparing military assistance, a package of about $750 million for Ukraine. How is that going to shape this conflict?
Well, we don't know exactly what's going to be in that package of military aid. So far, probably the most important military aid, the weapons shipments coming from the United States, have most likely been anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles. That is some of the military material that the Ukrainian army wants and that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been asking for repeatedly. As you mentioned, he spoke to the Estonian parliament today. He spoke to the Lithuanian parliament yesterday, the day before to the South Korean parliament. His request is always that one for heavy weaponry. The Ukrainian point of view is essentially this one, that it showed in its defense of its capital city, Kiev, and by routing the Russian armed forces there and pushing them back into Belarus and Russia respectively, that they showed that they can fight, but that they need more weapons to be able to beat the Russian army. That's why that demand from the Ukrainian presidency comes again and again. Of course, it's not the only one. There's also that demand for tougher sanctions on Russia that is repeated again and again by Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. But a full oil and gas embargo, a full energy embargo on Russian energy imports into the European Union, that is still something that Ukraine is simply not getting from the European Union right now.
All right, Philip, thank you very much for that. Philip Crowther there in Lviv.
Well, let's get more from Laura Mekanishewicz. She's joining us live from Riga, Latvia. Laura, President Putin swatting away further threats of sanctions, saying energy exports can easily be redirected away from the West. What message is he trying to send?
Well, he's certainly trying to maintain that he has some sort of control over this and, of course, over the Russian economy. The nation has been hit hard with sanctions from the West. Of course, oil, gas, coal, they've all been in the spotlight in terms of discussions internationally and how these different nations in the West might impose sanctions on them. A lot of countries have declared that they will start to wean themselves off Russian supplies. A lot of the West, of course, are still heavily dependent on those supplies from Russia. But Vladimir Putin is saying that he can actually push the oil and gas supplies in Russia towards the domestic market to continue having sales there. He's also saying that he will redirect those supplies to the countries that he says really needs them. So these are messages really from Vladimir Putin saying, you might leave us alone, but we've got other customers and other options. And he's also saying that these sanctions are hurting the West, Europe and the US as well, not least because of the soaring costs of oil over the last few weeks and months, but also because of the effects that then has on the average consumer, the average citizen within those countries. So clearly Vladimir Putin sending this message that he is going to continue trying to drum up other business elsewhere.
Now, Finland and Sweden are considering becoming NATO members, and that's something Russia continues to warn against. So I imagine it's not going down very well in Moscow.
No, and it looks like Finland may be considering putting in an application to join NATO, maybe as early as next month, starting those procedures, getting that application together after it published its new security review today that basically says that the entire landscape of security and defence has changed. Sweden as well, another country looking at potentially putting in an application. Reports say that could happen as soon as June. We understand that the Swedish Defence Minister is in Latvia today visiting a military base where NATO troops are stationed at the moment as part of NATO's enhanced forward presence. Battalions that are placed here trying to sort of defend the Baltic region, the eastern flank of Europe. But of course, Vladimir Putin is not going to be happy with that, with this expansion of NATO, should it happen. That was one of the reasons that Vladimir Putin gave for his decision to invade Ukraine, to defend Russia, he says, against this Western aggression. But now it looks likely that NATO will start to expand. That's not going to go down well. And of course, Finland shares a very long border on its eastern part with Russia. It is going to be in line with Russia then and the very eastern part of NATO should they join. Now, that clearly is a vulnerability, having that border there. And until very recently, Finland had been looking away from joining NATO, remaining sort of neutral in its stance. But it appears that the populations within Finland and now Sweden are changing their minds about NATO, about joining NATO, and support for that application is now growing.
And Laura Megan Isherwood in Riga, Latvia. Thank you.